The alarm screamed through the bridge of the ESS horizon. Commander Daejung ran his hand through his gray hair and stared at the screen. Something massive had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of human space, something that made his blood run cold. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," said the communications officer, her voice shaking. Daejung nodded. "Put it on screen." The image that appeared made everyone on the bridge go silent. The alien was tall, with dark red skin covered in scales. Its eyes were yellow and cold. Forearms crossed over its chest in a gesture that somehow felt like a threat. When it spoke, the translation software turned its words into something humans could understand. "I am War Prince Thelvar of the Velkaran Dominion. We have conquered 847 star systems in our 3,000 years of expansion. You will surrender your worlds to us within 30 of your days, or we will erase your species from existence. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." The screen went black. Daejung looked at his crew. They all looked back at him with fear in their eyes. The Velkaran Dominion. They had heard stories from other species. Stories of entire civilizations wiped out. Stories of planets burned to ash. The Velkarans had never lost a war. "Get me President Sunho," Daejung said quietly. "Right now." 2 days later, Captain Ji-won stood in the docking bay of Crosspoint Station. She was humanity's best diplomat. A woman who had talked her way out of 3 different trade disputes without a single shot being fired. If anyone could reason with the Velkarans, it was her. She brought 10 people with her. Diplomats, translators, and cultural experts. They all wore their best uniforms and carried no weapons. Ji-won had studied everything humanity knew about the Velkarans. They respected strength, but they also followed strict protocols. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to avoid war. The Velkaran delegation was already waiting in the meeting room. War Prince Thelvar sat at the head of the table, his forearms resting on the surface. 6 other Velkarans stood behind him, all of them armed with strange weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. "We come in peace," Ji-won said, bowing slightly. "We wish to discuss—" "There is nothing to discuss," Thelvar interrupted. His voice was like metal scraping on stone. "You will submit or you will die. Those are your only choices." Ji-won kept her voice calm. "Surely there must be some middle ground. Humans are a peaceful species. We have resources we could trade. Technology we could share. There's no reason for conflict." Thelvar stood up. He was nearly 8 feet tall. "You think you can bargain with the Dominion? You think your little toys and trinkets interest us?" He turned to one of his guards. "Show them what happens to those who waste our time." What happened next took less than 5 seconds. The Velkaran guards raised their weapons. Blue light filled the room. Ji-won heard screaming. She smelled burning flesh. When her vision cleared, all 10 of her people were dead. Burned corpses on the floor of the meeting room. Only she remained standing. Thelvar had held up one hand, stopping the guards from shooting her. "I let you live for one reason," the War Prince said. "You will return to your people and tell them what you saw here. You will tell them that the Velkaran Dominion does not negotiate. We conquer. You have 28 days remaining. Use them to prepare for your deaths." Ji-won looked at the bodies of her friends and colleagues. She felt something break inside her, something that had always believed in peace and reason and diplomacy. She looked up at Thelvar with tears running down her face. "You just made a terrible mistake," she whispered. Thelvar laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound. "The only mistake your species made was being discovered by us." 4 days later, the United Terran Council met in Geneva. The room was deep underground, protected by layers of steel and concrete. President Sunho sat at the head of the table, his face showing no emotion. Around him sat the leaders of every human colony and nation. Admiral Taemin stood at the front of the room, pointing to a holographic display. "The intelligence is clear," he said. "The Velkaran Dominion commands a fleet 10 times larger than ours. Their weapons are more advanced. Their ships are faster and better armored. In a direct fight, we would lose in a matter of weeks." Council member Hayrim spoke up. "Then we have no choice but to surrender. At least some of us might survive as slaves. If we fight, they'll kill everyone." "Slavery is not survival," said another council member. "It's a different kind of death." The argument went back and forth for hours. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted to surrender. Some wanted to run, to take whatever ships they had and flee into deep space, hoping to hide. President Sunho listened to it all. He was an old man, nearly 80 years old. He had lived through the resource wars of the 2090s. He had seen what humans could do to each other when desperate. He had also seen what humans could achieve when they refused to give up. Finally, he stood up. The room went quiet. "I've been thinking about history," Sunho said. "Earth's history. We've had so many wars, so many empires that thought they couldn't be defeated. The Romans, the Mongols, the British, the Americans. They all believed they were invincible. They were all wrong." He walked around the table slowly. "Every empire falls. Every conqueror eventually loses. You want to know why? Because the people they try to conquer eventually decide that death is better than chains. And when people make that choice, they become dangerous. More dangerous than any weapon." Admiral Taemin nodded slowly. "You want to fight?" "I want to show them what humanity really is," Sunho said. "The Velkarans have conquered 847 systems, but they've never fought humans before. They've never faced a species that spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war. They think we'll roll over and die. They're wrong." He looked at each council member in turn. "I'm not going to order anyone to fight. This has to be a choice, but I'm choosing to fight. I'm choosing to show these aliens that humans don't break. We bend, we adapt, we survive, and we remember." Hayrim stood up. She had tears in her eyes. "If we fight, millions will die. If we surrender, billions will die as slaves," Sunho replied. "Or we'll be wiped out anyway when the Velkarans decide we're too much trouble. At least if we fight, we die as free people." The vote took 30 minutes. When it was done, the decision was unanimous. Humanity would fight. Sunho turned to Admiral Taemin. "Activate Protocol Reaper." The Admiral's eyes widened. Protocol Reaper was a plan so desperate, so dangerous, that everyone had hoped it would never be needed. It wasn't just a military strategy. It was a complete transformation of human society. Every colony would become a fortress. Every civilian would become a soldier. Every resource would be turned toward one goal: survival. "Are you sure?" Taemin asked. Sunho nodded. "We have 24 days until the Velkarans expect our surrender. Let's use them well. And let's teach the galaxy's deadliest empire a lesson they'll never forget." Deep in the research facility beneath Luna's surface, Dr. Youngsik and Engineer Bora received the activation codes for Protocol Reaper. They looked at each other with a mixture of fear and determination. "They really want us to do this?" Bora asked. Youngsik pulled up the plans they had been working on for years. Plans that every admiral had called insane. Plans that might just work against an enemy who had never faced real desperation. "Get everyone together," Youngsik said. "We're going to build something that will make the Velkarans wish they'd never heard of humanity." The countdown had begun. 24 days until war. 24 days to prepare for the impossible. The galaxy's deadliest empire was about to learn that sometimes the smallest prey can have the sharpest teeth. Part 2. The First Strike. The Velkaran, First Armada, dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Arcturus system. War Marshal Krendor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Fang, and smiled. 800 warships surrounded him, all ready to crush the humans into dust. "Scan the colony," Krendor ordered. "Show me where the military targets are." His tactical officer studied the screens for a moment, then looked confused. "Sir, there are no military installations. Just civilian settlements. About 2 million humans living on the surface. No orbital defenses. No weapons platforms." Krendor's smile grew wider. "Perfect. They're already broken. They're not even going to fight back." He opened a communication channel to the colony. "Humans of Arcturus, this is War Marshal Krendor. You have 1 hour to evacuate to the northern continent. After that, we will demonstrate what happens to species who defy the Dominion." On the surface of Arcturus, the humans heard the message. They looked at each other and then they started moving. But they weren't running in panic. They moved with purpose, following a plan they had practiced 100 times in the past 3 weeks. Commander Hyunwoo watched from his hiding spot in the asteroid field. His fleet was small, only 32 ships compared to the Velkaran 800. But he had 2 advantages. First, the Velkarans didn't know he was there. Second, humans had learned a long time ago that you don't beat a stronger enemy by fighting fair. "All ships hold position," Hyunwoo said quietly into his communicator. "Let them think they've won." Exactly 1 hour later, Krendor gave the order. 20 Velkaran heavy cruisers moved into position over the southern continent of Arcturus. Their weapons charged, glowing with deadly energy. Then they fired. The beams of superheated plasma struck the surface. Cities disappeared in balls of fire. Mountains melted. Oceans boiled. In 30 seconds, the southern continent became a wasteland. Krendor watched the destruction with satisfaction. Send a message to all human colonies. Tell them this is what happens when you resist the Dominion. That's when everything went wrong for the Velcarans. The asteroids around them suddenly came alive. What the Velcarans thought were just rocks turned out to be human ships with their engines powered down. 32 warships, all of them launching missiles at point-blank range. Ambush. Someone screamed on the Velcaran command channel. Hyunwoo's voice cut through the chaos. All ships fire at will. Target their engines and weapon systems. Hit them fast and hard! The battle was brutal and short. The human ships were smaller and weaker than the Velcaran vessels, but they had surprise on their side. More importantly, they fought like nothing the Velcarans had ever seen before. Captain Yunji commanded the destroyer Pride of Busan. She flew her ship directly at the Crimson Fang, dodging fire from a dozen Velcaran weapons. Her ship took hit after hit, armor melting away, half her crew dead. But she kept going. "Ma'am, we're losing power," her engineering officer shouted. Yunji looked at the massive Velcaran flagship on her screen. She had a choice. She could turn away, try to escape, or she could do what she came here to do. "All hands abandon ship," she ordered. "You have 30 seconds. "Captain, what are you—" "That's an order," Yunji snapped. She watched as the escape pods launched. 28 pods carrying 130 people. Not everyone would make it, but some would. That was enough. She pointed her dying ship at the Crimson Fang and pushed the engines to maximum. The Pride of Busan turned into a missile, traveling at a significant fraction of light speed, straight at the Velcaran flagship. Krendor saw it coming. He tried to turn his ship, tried to bring his defenses to bear, but he was too slow. The destroyer hit the Crimson Fang like a hammer striking glass. The explosion could be seen from the planet's surface. Both ships simply ceased to exist, torn apart by forces that turned metal into vapor and vapor into light. Commander Hyunwoo watched Captain Yunji die. He felt a knife twist in his chest. She had been his friend for 20 years, but there was no time to grieve. "All ships retreat to Rally Point Delta," he ordered. Mission accomplished. The human fleet disappeared back into the asteroid field, using the rocks and debris to cover their escape. Behind them, the Velcaran armada was in chaos. They had lost their flagship and their commander. 200 of their ships were damaged, and the humans had simply vanished. On the surface of Arcturus, the evacuation was nearly complete. The cities in the south had been fake, constructed buildings with no one inside them. The real population had been hiding in underground shelters in the north for weeks, waiting for this moment. Sergeant Minsu stood at the entrance to Shelter 7 watching the sky burn. He was the last one out, making sure every civilian made it to the evacuation ships. 2 million people, all of them getting away while the Velcarans were distracted. "Sergeant, we need to go now," someone called. Minsu took one last look at the planet he had called home. The southern continent was destroyed, turned into a hellscape of fire and ash. But it was empty. Not a single human had died there. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Let's go." The evacuation fleet jumped to faster than light speed just as more Velcaran ships arrived. They had done it. They had made the galaxy's deadliest empire bleed. The news of the Battle of Arcturus spread through human space like wildfire. Commander Hyunwoo had lost 19 of his 32 ships. 600 people dead, including Captain Yunji. The southern continent of Arcturus was gone forever, but humanity had won its first victory. The Velcarans weren't invincible. They could be hurt. They could be tricked. They could be beaten. On Earth, President Sun Ho addressed the entire human species in a broadcast that reached every colony, every ship, every outpost. "Today we proved something important," Sun Ho said. "The Velcarans thought we would be easy prey. They thought we would surrender or die without a fight. They were wrong. Commander Hyunwoo and Captain Yunji showed them what humans are really made of. We will not surrender. We will not break, and we will make them pay for every inch of space they try to take from us." The broadcast ended with an image of Captain Yunji, smiling in her uniform from before the war. Across human space, people looked at that image and felt something they hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. But not everyone was celebrating. Admiral Taemin stood in the war room, looking at the casualty reports. 600 dead in one battle, 19 ships destroyed, An entire continent burned. "This is just the beginning," he said to Dr. Youngsik, who had come to discuss the next phase of Protocol Reaper. "I know," Youngsik replied. "The Velkarans are going to come at us with everything they have now. We embarrass them. They won't make the same mistake twice," Taman nodded, "which is why we need to be ready for Phase 2. How long until the defense grid is complete?" 3 more weeks, maybe less if we push the workers harder. Push them as hard as you can without killing them. We're going to need every weapon, every trap, every trick we can think of. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, War Prince Thelvar received the report of what happened at Arcturus. He read it 3 times, not believing what he was seeing. The humans had won. They had actually won a battle against the Dominion. Thelvar's 4 hands clenched into fists. He turned to his second-in-command. "Execute the officer who replaced Krendor. Execute his entire staff, and mobilize the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th armadas. I want 3,000 ships ready to move within 10 days. Sir, that's nearly 40% of our entire military." "What's the target?" Thelvar's yellow eyes burned with rage. "Earth. We're going to bypass their colonies and strike at their homeworld. We're going to show them what happens when you humiliate the Velkaran Dominion. And this time there will be no tricks, no ambushes, no escapes. We will turn their planet into ash, and we will make the rest of the galaxy watch." The second-in-command hesitated. "Sir, if we commit that many forces to one attack, do you question my orders?" "No, sir." "Good, because the humans are about to learn that winning one battle means nothing. We have been conquering species for 3,000 years. One lucky ambush doesn't change anything." But deep down, Thelvar felt something he had never felt before in his long military career. A tiny sliver of doubt. The humans had done something no species had done in centuries. They had made the Velkaran Dominion bleed. And if they could do it once, maybe they could do it again. He pushed the thought away. Doubt was weakness, and weakness was death. Part 3. Earth Stands Admiral Tamin stared at the tactical display and felt his stomach drop. 3 Velkaran armadas were approaching the Sol system. 3,000 warships, all of them heading straight for Earth like a wave of death. "They're not holding anything back," he said quietly. Commander Hyunwoo, now promoted and standing beside him, nodded grimly. "War Prince Thelvar is leading them personally. He wants revenge for Arcturus. How long until they arrive?" 18 hours. Taman looked at the defenses humanity had built around Earth. After weeks of desperate work, they had turned the entire Sol system into a fortress. Every asteroid in the belt had been armed with missiles and railguns. Mars and Luna bristled with defensive platforms. Earth itself was surrounded by layers of mines, weapons, satellites, and the remnants of humanity's navy. It still wasn't enough. Not against 3,000 ships. "Send the message to all stations," Taman said. "This is it. This is where we make our stand." President Sun Ho sat in the command center deep beneath Geneva, watching the same tactical display. He was an old man, and the stress of the past months had aged him even more. But his voice was steady when he activated the broadcast system. "People of Earth," he began. "In a few hours, the Velkaran Dominion will arrive at our doorstep. They come with thousands of ships intent on destroying our world. They think we will break. They think we will surrender when we see how hopeless our situation is." He paused, letting the words sink in. "They're wrong. Humanity has faced extinction before. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters. We've always found a way, and we will find a way today." Sun Ho's eyes were hard as stone. "Every man, woman, and child on Earth knows what to do. We've prepared for this. We've trained for this. And when those ships arrive, we're going to show them that Earth doesn't fall. Not today. Not ever." The broadcast ended. Across the planet, 4 billion people went to their battle stations. Teachers grabbed rifles. Factory workers manned anti-aircraft guns. Children too young to fight huddled in deep bunkers, while their parents prepared to defend them. The Velkaran Armada dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. War Prince Thelvar stood on the bridge of his new flagship, looking at the human homeworld on his screens. "Such a small planet," he said. "And yet they dare to resist us." His tactical officer pointed to the display. "Sir, we're detecting extensive defensive positions. The humans have fortified everything from the asteroid belt inward. It won't matter. Begin the assault. I want Earth burned to bedrock by sunset." The Velkaran fleet advanced in a wall of ships that stretched across space. They came slowly, carefully, expecting traps, and they found them. The asteroid belt exploded with weapons fire. Thousands of missiles launched from hidden silos. Railgun rounds, traveling at incredible speeds, punched through Velkaran shields and armor. Mines that had been disguised as space debris detonated, tearing holes in the enemy formation. But the Velkarans kept coming. For every ship humanity destroyed, 10 more took its place. Commander Dae-jung commanded the battle from the crippled ESS Horizon. His ship had been damaged at Arcturus and patched together with spare parts and hope. Now it was his flagship for the defense of Earth. All ships focus fire on their command vessels, Dae-jung ordered. Don't waste ammunition on the small ones. Take out their leadership and they'll lose coordination. Captain Yoon Seo heard the order from her cruiser, the Indomitable Spirit. She was 34 years old and had 2 children in the bunkers beneath Seoul. She would never see them grow up. She had accepted that weeks ago. Helm, set course for that dreadnought, she said, pointing at one of the massive Velkaran capital ships. Ma'am, you heard me. All hands to escape pods. You have 60 seconds, her crew understood immediately. They had all known this moment might come. They abandoned ship in a rush of emergency procedures, leaving Yoon Seo alone on the bridge. She looked at a picture on her console, her children smiling at the camera. I'm sorry I can't be there, she whispered. But this is how I keep you safe. The Indomitable Spirit accelerated to maximum speed. Velkaran gunners tried to stop it, but Yoon Seo dodged with skill born from years of experience. She was the best pilot in the fleet, and she used every bit of that skill now. The cruiser slammed into the Velkaran dreadnought at over 20,000 kilometers per second. Both ships vanished in a flash of light bright enough to blind sensors across the system. All over human space, people watched the battle. They saw their ships die. They saw brave people make final stands. They saw the Velkarans push closer and closer to Earth. But they also saw the Velkarans bleeding. Losing ships, losing people, paying a terrible price for every kilometer they advanced. Sergeant Min-soo had become something of a celebrity after Arcturus. Now he was on Mars, commanding a defense battery with 100 other soldiers. Most of them were civilians 2 months ago. Teachers, accountants, artists. Now they were all soldiers. The Velkaran attack reached Mars on the 3rd day of battle. Dropships descended through the thin atmosphere, carrying thousands of Velkaran shock troops. Min-soo watched them come. Wait for it, he told his people. Wait until they're close. The Velkaran soldiers were huge, powerful, and heavily armed. They wore armor that could stop bullets. They had fought 1,000 battles on 100 worlds. But they had never fought on Mars. They didn't know the terrain. They didn't know the traps. And they didn't know that every single human on this planet was ready to die rather than surrender. Now, Min-soo shouted. The defensive position erupted with gunfire. Missiles streaked from hidden launchers. Explosives buried in the red sand detonated. The Velkaran advance staggered. Keep firing. Min-soo reloaded his rifle and shot a Velkaran soldier who got too close. The alien fell and 2 more took its place. Don't let them reach the bunkers. The battle raged for 18 hours. Min-soo's position held, but barely. Of his 100 soldiers, only 32 survived. And the Velkarans just kept coming. On Earth, the situation was worse. Velkaran ships broke through the orbital defenses and began landing troops. War Prince Thelvar wanted to occupy the planet, not just destroy it. He wanted humans alive so he could parade them as slaves throughout the galaxy. Hyojin was a high school teacher in a residential district near Tokyo. She was 41 years old, had never fired a gun before the war, and was now commanding a militia defense of an arcology that housed 10,000 civilians. The Velkaran elites came in the middle of the night. These weren't regular soldiers. These were the Dominion's best warriors, each one worth 10 normal troops. They expected to sweep through the human defenses in minutes. They found Hyojin and her students waiting for them. Remember what we practiced, Hyojin said calmly, even though her heart was pounding. They're bigger and stronger, but this is our home. We know every hallway, every hiding spot, every way in and out. The Velkarans entered the arcology. They found themselves in a maze. Doors locked behind them. Floors collapsed under their feet. Children threw homemade explosives from ventilation shafts. Elderly men and women attacked from the shadows with whatever weapons they could find. It took the Velkaran elites 18 hours to secure a single arcology. When they finally reached the top floor, they found Hyojin still fighting. She was wounded, covered in blood, most of her people dead, but she was still standing. Come on then, she said, raising her rifle with shaking hands. A Velkaran officer looked at her with something like respect. You fought well, human. Not well enough, Yojin replied. Then she pressed the detonator. The charges she had planted throughout the building went off simultaneously. The entire arcology came down, burying Hyojin, the Velkaran elites, and 10,000 civilians who had refused to evacuate. War Prince Thelvar received the reports and felt something crack inside him. This wasn't a battle. This was a massacre on both sides. He had killed millions of humans. But the humans had destroyed nearly a quarter of his fleet. They were making him pay for every meter of ground, and they still wouldn't surrender. How much longer? He demanded. Sir, at this rate, we'll take Earth in another 4 days. But our losses? I don't care about losses. Thelvar roared. These humans must be broken. They must learn that resistance is futile. But in his heart, Thelvar knew something was wrong. The Dominion had conquered 847 systems. Some had fought harder than others, but none had fought like this. None had made victory taste like defeat. On the 6th day of the Battle of Earth, Velkaran forces finally breached the final orbital defense line. They prepared to begin systematic bombardment of the planet's surface. Victory was within reach. That's when Admiral Taemin sent a message to War Prince Thelvar. A simple message, broadcast on all channels so every Velkaran in the system could hear it. War Prince Thelvar, this is Admiral Taemin of Earth. We have a proposition for you. Thelvar was surprised they were finally offering surrender. Speak, human. While you've been fighting here, we've been busy elsewhere. Right now, 50 ships are approaching your home world. They're not warships. They're faster than warships. Much faster. They're traveling at 80% of the speed of light. Nothing can stop them. When they hit your planet, the kinetic energy will shatter your world like a glass ball hit with a hammer. Part 4. The Turning Point War Prince. Thelvar stood frozen on his bridge, staring at the sensor data. The humans weren't lying. 50 objects were indeed racing toward the Velkaran homeworld at impossible speeds. Relativistic kill vehicles, planet killers. How long until they reach Velkara Prime? He asked quietly. 4 hours, sir. Even if we send ships now, they can't intercept in time. Nothing can stop them. Thelvar's 4 hands gripped the edge of his command console. In his 300 years of military service, he had never faced a situation like this. The Dominion had rules for everything, protocols for every scenario, but there was no protocol for an enemy willing to commit mutual extinction. Contact the High Command, he said finally. I need authorization to negotiate. His second officer looked shocked. Sir, the Dominion does not negotiate. The Dominion also does not die, Thelvar snapped. Get them on the channel. Now. But faster than light communication took time. Hours would pass before he received a response from the Velkaran government. Hours he didn't have. Admiral Taemin waited in the command center beneath Geneva. He looked exhausted. They all did. 6 days of continuous battle had pushed everyone to their limits. Do you think he'll take the deal? Commander Hyunwoo asked. I don't know. The Velkarans have never backed down before. Their entire culture is built on the idea that they're invincible. They're not invincible anymore. We proved that. Taemin nodded slowly. That's what I'm counting on. Thelvar is smart enough to see the truth. His empire is dying whether he admits it or not. President Sunho entered the room moving slowly. He had aged years in the past weeks. If he doesn't accept, we follow through? Yes, Taemin said without hesitation. We don't bluff. If the Velkarans destroy Earth, we erase their species. That's the deal. Sunho looked at the display showing the relativistic missiles speeding toward Velkara Prime. I hope it doesn't come to that. Genocide, even justified genocide, is still genocide. They started this war, Hyunwoo said bitterly. They killed millions of us. They would have killed billions more. I know, Sunho replied, but that doesn't mean I have to like what we've become. While Thelvar waited for his orders, something else was happening across the galaxy, something the War Prince didn't know about yet. On the occupied world of Valthos, a subject species that had been conquered by the Velkarans 200 years ago, a young resistance leader named Specialist So Young was watching human news broadcasts. So Young wasn't human. She was Valthun, A species that looked almost human except for their blue skin and 3 eyes. But she had been studying humanity since the war began. She had watched the Battle of Arcturus. She had seen humans refuse to surrender. "They're actually doing it," she whispered to her second-in-command. "They're fighting back against the Dominion and winning." "Winning? They're dying by the millions." "But the Velkarons are dying too, don't you see? For the first time in centuries, someone is making them bleed." So Young stood up, her 3 eyes blazing with determination. "If the humans can do it, so can we." "What are you suggesting?" "Rebellion. Right now, while the Velkaran forces are concentrated at Earth. They left minimum garrisons on all the occupied worlds. We'll never have a better chance." Within hours, So Young had sent messages to every resistance cell on Valthos. Within days, those messages spread to other occupied worlds. The spark of human defiance was becoming a flame. On Valthos, the Velkaran garrison consisted of 500 soldiers controlling a population of 3 billion. The Valthuns had been peaceful for 2 centuries, broken and submissive. So Young and her rebels struck at midnight. They hit supply depots first, then communication centers. The Velkaran garrison commander barely had time to send a distress signal before his headquarters was surrounded. It wasn't a clean fight. Thousands of Valthuns died, but in the end, the garrison was destroyed. Valthos was free for the first time in 200 years. And then other worlds started to rise. The Crethean wastes, the Torvan colonies, the Nexian Republic. All across the Velkaran Dominion, subject species saw what was happening and made their choice. War Prince Thelvar finally received the news while he was still waiting for authorization from the High Command. A junior officer approached nervously. "Sir, we're receiving reports of rebellions in over 30 systems." "What?" "The subject species are rising up. They're attacking our garrisons. Some are succeeding." Thelvar felt the world tilt around him. The Dominion was built on fear. If that fear was broken, everything would collapse. "How did this happen?" he demanded. "The humans, sir." The subject species saw the humans fighting back and decided to do the same. Thelvar looked at the tactical display. His fleet at Earth, the rebellions across the Dominion, the relativistic missiles heading for his homeworld. Everything was falling apart. Finally, the communication from High Command arrived. The message was simple. Do what you must to preserve the Dominion. Thelvar understood. They were giving him permission to make the decision himself. The responsibility was his alone. He opened a channel to Admiral Taiman. "Human Admiral, I wish to discuss terms." Taiman felt relief wash over him. "I'm listening." "If I withdraw my forces from Earth, will you recall your weapons?" "Yes. The moment your last ship leaves Sol system, we'll send the abort codes." "And the rebellions in our territory?" Taiman paused. "That's not our doing. We have no control over what other species choose to do." Thelvar closed his eyes. He knew what the Admiral was really saying. The Dominion was doomed. Even if they won at Earth, the Empire was crumbling from within. "Very well. I am ordering a full withdrawal. But know this, human. This is not over. The Velkaran Dominion will not forget this humiliation." "War Prince," Taiman said quietly. "Your empire is dying. You can spend its final days trying to kill us, or you can try to save what's left of your people. That's your choice." The Velkaran fleet began withdrawing from Sol system, slowly at first, then faster. Within 12 hours, every Velkaran ship was gone. President Sun Ho sat in the command center and wept. Not from joy, but from exhaustion and grief. Earth had survived, but the cost was almost too much to comprehend. 15 million dead, 3 major cities destroyed, entire regions burned. "Send the abort codes," he ordered. "Call back the missiles." The 50 relativistic weapons received their new instructions and changed course. They would slingshot around, Velkara Prime, and keep going into deep space, eventually leaving the galaxy entirely. Across human space, people emerged from their bunkers. They looked at the sky and saw that it was empty of enemy ships. They had done the impossible. They had fought the galaxy's deadliest empire and survived. But the war wasn't over. Not really. Commander Hyun-woo stood on the surface of Mars, looking at the damage. The red planet had paid a heavy price. Entire settlements destroyed. Thousands dead. Sergeant Min-soo found him there. The young soldier who had become a hero looked older now. Harder. "What happens now, sir?" Min-soo asked. Hyun-woo pointed at the stars. "Now we help the others, the Valtoons, the Krethians, all the species the Velkarons enslaved. They're fighting for their freedom because we showed them it was possible." "We're going to war again?" "No. We're going to help people win their wars. There's a difference." Back on Earth, Captain Ji-won stood at the memorial for the people who had died in the War Prince's demonstration at Crosspoint Station. Her diplomatic team, murdered to make a point. She had survived. She had watched Earth nearly die. And now she had a new job. "Ambassador Ji-won," President Sun-ho said, approaching her. "That's your new title. We need someone to help build something better than the Dominion. Someone who understands that strength without wisdom is just brutality." Ji-won looked at the memorial, at the names carved in stone. "I'll do it, but we do it right. No revenge, no new empire. We help people be free, and then we let them choose their own path." Sun-ho nodded. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear." Deep in space, War Prince Thelvar sat alone in his quarters. He had been stripped of his rank by what was left of the High Command. The Velkaron Dominion was falling apart. Within a year, it would cease to exist. He thought about the humans, about their stubborn refusal to accept defeat, about how they had been willing to die rather than submit. And he thought about his own species. The Velkarons had once been peaceful. 3,000 years ago, they had been conquered by another empire. They swore they would never be victims again, so they became conquerors instead. Now that cycle was ending, not because the Velkarons were defeated by a stronger enemy, but because they had finally met someone who refused to play by the rules of empire at all. Thelvar made a decision. He sent a message to Earth requesting asylum. He didn't expect them to accept. Why would they show mercy to someone who had tried to destroy them? But to his surprise, President Sun-ho said yes. Part 5, A New Galaxy 2. Years after the war, Commander Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of the humanitarian vessel Hope's Dawn as it entered orbit around Valthos. Below him, the blue-skinned Valtoon people had been free for 20 months, but freedom came with problems. "Sir, we're receiving multiple requests for aid," his communications officer reported. "Food supplies, medical equipment, and they need help rebuilding their power grid." Hyun-woo nodded. "Send down the relief teams, and tell them we're here to help, not to rule." On the surface, Specialist So-young waited at the landing pad. She had become something of a legend among the freed species, the resistance leader who sparked the rebellions that helped bring down the Dominion. When Hyun-woo's shuttle landed, she approached with a mixture of gratitude and caution. The Valtoons had been conquered once before. They didn't want it to happen again. "Commander Hyun-woo," So-young said, bowing slightly. "Welcome to Free Valthos." "Thank you for having us," Hyun-woo replied. "We brought supplies and engineers. They're yours, no strings attached," Young studied his face. "No strings? Humans could build an empire now. You defeated the Dominion. Many species would follow you out of gratitude or fear." Hyun-woo smiled sadly. "We've seen what empires become. We're not interested in repeating that mistake." Over the next months, human relief fleets visited dozens of former Velkaran territories. They brought food, medicine, and technical assistance. But more importantly, they brought respect. They helped each species rebuild. Then they left. Ambassador Ji-won traveled to every liberated world, meeting with their leaders. On Krethia, she sat with a council of elders who had survived the Velkaran occupation. "We want to understand," one elder said. "Why do you help us? What do you gain?" Ji-won thought about her diplomatic team, killed by War Prince Thelvar 2 years ago. She thought about the 15 million humans who died defending Earth. She thought about all the suffering the war had caused. "We gain nothing material," she said finally, "but we gain something more important. We gain a galaxy where species can be free, where might doesn't make right, where you can choose your own destiny without fear." The Krethian elder was quiet for a moment. "And if we choose to be your enemies? Then you have that right." Freedom means freedom to make your own choices, even ones we disagree with. The elder smiled for the first time. I think I am beginning to understand you humans. On Earth, President Sunho met with War Prince Thelvar in a secure facility outside Geneva. The former War Prince had spent the past 2 years as a guest of humanity, living under guard but treated with basic dignity. Why did you let me live? Thelvar asked. It wasn't the first time he had asked this question. Sunho poured tea for both of them. It was a human gesture Thelvar had learned to appreciate. Because you represent something important. You're proof that even enemies can change, that redemption is possible. I ordered the deaths of millions of your people. Yes, and you'll have to live with that for the rest of your life. But you also called off the attack when you realized the cost. You chose to save your people rather than destroy mine out of pride. That counts for something. Thelvar looked at his 4 hands. The Dominion is gone. Most of my species are scattered across the galaxy, refugees in the territory we once ruled. Some of your people have applied to join the coalition. Did you know that? Thelvar looked up in surprise. The coalition? Sunho nodded. Ambassador Jiwan has been working to establish something new. Not an empire. A voluntary alliance of free species. The Galactic Coalition. Over 100 species have joined so far. And you would accept Velkarans into this coalition? After everything we did? Not me. The coalition members will vote on it. But I'll support the application. Your species were once peaceful. Before you were conquered and traumatized. Maybe you can be peaceful again. 1 year later, Ambassador Jiwan stood before the first full assembly of the Galactic Coalition. Representatives from 127 different species filled the Great Hall on Crosspoint Station, the same station where her team had been murdered 3 years ago. We gather here today to establish a new way forward, Jiwan said. For thousands of years, this galaxy has been ruled by empires, the strong conquering the weak. Species enslaved, worlds burned. The Velkaran Dominion was just the latest in a long line of tyrannies. She looked around the room. But empires all have one thing in common. They fall. Sometimes it takes centuries, sometimes decades. But they always fall because rule by force is not sustainable. Fear is not loyalty. Submission is not peace. A Valtun delegate stood up. What do you propose instead, Ambassador? Freedom, cooperation, mutual defense without domination. Any species can join the coalition. Any species can leave. We make decisions together. We protect each other. But we don't rule each other. A Krethian representative raised their hand. And if a species uses this freedom to harm others, to become a new empire, then we stop them. Together. That's what mutual defense means. We won't allow tyranny to rise again. The Assembly voted. The Galactic Coalition Charter passed with only 3 dissenting votes. Sergeant Minsu, now Lieutenant Minsu, stood in the Earth Defense Force Academy, teaching a class of new recruits. Some were human. Many were not. Valtuns, Krethians, even a few young Velkarans who had rejected their species' imperial past. War is not about glory, Minsu told his students. It's about survival, about protecting what matters, about making sure that when you go into battle you come out still remembering why you fought. A young Velkaran student raised his hand. Lieutenant, why did humans stop fighting? You could have built a great empire. Minsu looked at the student for a long moment. Because we learned something important. Power without purpose is just destruction. We fought to be free. Once we were free, the fighting needed to stop. Otherwise, we'd become what we were fighting against. In the research facilities on Luna, Dr. Youngsik and Engineer Bora stood before the relativistic weapons that had nearly destroyed the Velkaran homeworld. 50 missiles, each one capable of shattering a planet. Are you sure about this? Bora asked. Youngsik nodded. We built these to survive. We don't need them anymore. And we don't want anyone else to have them. They input the final decommissioning codes. The weapons' power cores were removed, their guidance systems wiped, their hulls converted into building materials for orbital habitats. Do you think we'll ever need something like this again? Bora asked quietly. I hope not. But if we do, we'll build them again. That's what humans do. We adapt, we survive. But we also learn. 10 years after the war, Commander Hyunwoo retired from the military. He had spent a decade helping freed species rebuild their civilizations. Now he was tired. He returned to Earth and visited the War Memorial in Seoul. Millions of names were carved into the black stone walls. Captain Yoonji, Captain Yoon Seo, Hyojin, the teacher who became a warrior, So many others, specialists so young, found him there. She had also retired, now serving as the Voltune representative to the Coalition Council. "I come here sometimes," she said, "to remember what your people sacrificed." "They died so others could be free," Yunwu replied. "All of them. Human and non-human. That has to mean something." "It does. The Coalition now has 200 member species. We haven't had a major war in 8 years. Your species changed the galaxy." Yunwu shook his head. "We didn't change it alone. You Valthuns rose up when we needed allies. The Crethians shared their technology. The Coalition exists because everyone chose to build it together." War Prince Thelvar died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 320. In his final years, he had taught at the Galactic History Institute, documenting the rise and fall of the Velcaran Dominion. His last words were recorded by his human caretaker. "Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them I finally understand." His funeral was attended by humans, Valtuns, Crethians, and even some of his own people. President Sunho, now in his 90s, gave the eulogy. "Thelvar was our enemy," Sunho said. "He tried to destroy us. But in his final years, he showed us something important. People can change. Even those who have done terrible things can find redemption. His story is proof that the cycle of violence can be broken." 50 years after the war, humanity celebrated the anniversary of the Battle of Earth. The planet had been rebuilt. The scars had healed, though they were not forgotten. Lieutenant Minsu, now Admiral Minsu and commander of the Coalition Defense Forces, stood before a crowd of millions. Human and alien, all of them living in peace. "We remember the war not to celebrate violence," he said, "but to honor sacrifice. To remember that freedom is never free, and to teach future generations that the greatest victory is not in conquering others, but in building a galaxy where everyone can live without fear." In the audience, young students listened. Human children sat next to Velcaran children. Valtun teenagers talked with Crethian friends, a new generation that had never known empire or war. And far across the galaxy, a new species was taking its first steps into space. They were aggressive, expansionist, already planning to conquer their neighbors. Then they received a transmission. It bore the seal of the Galactic Coalition. "We are humanity. We ended the Velcaran Dominion without destroying the Velcaran people. We have built an alliance of 200 free worlds from the ashes of tyranny.